Yeah, I confess, Father, I confess, 'cause I've been living.
Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Alright, so the starter clutch went through so well, I went on and decided to go ahead and install my 171 today. So that's what we're going to be working on. So I am plenty excited, even though you might not hear it in my voice. Let's go over the tools that we'll be using to do this installation. And before I start even talking about the tools, I do want to mention you do want to use hand tools when assembling your engine, not power tools. So here we have our 8mm, 10mm, and 12mm sockets, an extension, and then our socket ratcheters. If you see here, the Tectons that I like a lot, they have a pivoting head. So when you're in tight spots, it works out great for me. We also have the Permatex Ultra Slick Engine Assembly Lube. I'm going to be putting this on the engine parts instead of regular oil. To keep the components from binding up, you want to have some type of lube at the top of the engine for when you first start it. There's no oil, it's still in the crankcase, so it takes a while for the oil to get to the top of the engine, so we want to make sure we have things lubricated up there. Alright, so I can already see that we're going to be having a problem with the camera angles and getting my arms in the way of showing the work. So what I'm going to do is film it in segments. I'm going to show you exactly what I'm going to do and then pause the video and then come back and you'll actually see the finished work. So I just wanted to start by saying that these dowel pins are the first thing, or case alignment pins, the first thing that go in, and the first set of them will actually both go on the right side. Next up we'll be installing is our first gasket of a series of 2. On this, I just want to make sure that that chain has to go through all of the canals that you'll see. They all line up for the Taida cylinder, the cylinder head, and so on. So you'll have to actually hold that chain up while you're fitting these on. So let me get that done. Alright, so now that the gasket is in place, we're going to go ahead and install our Taida cylinder, and we're going to secure that to the stroker. Alright, before we even start talking about the cylinder, I just want to mention that you want your timing to be at top dead center. Alright, so you be making an adjustment on your fan that would in sense move your chain to the point where it's going to have the piston at the top of the cylinder when it's actually pushed down. So when I push it all the way down, the piston should be at the top part of the cylinder. Now what's going to secure the piston to the stroker is we have here a piston wrist pin that is secured by G-clips. Now I already installed one of my G-clips in here to make it life a little bit easier on me. But on the other side, when I go ahead and secure it, the stroker is going to be placed in here, and this wrist pin will keep it secure, and I'll have to go ahead and put another G-clip on this side. Now that's by far the hardest thing about doing this install. I'm going to do it off camera, so I'll see you guys in a minute. Wish me luck. Alright, I am done with that last pin, and now I see why they actually take the motors out. Took me about 20 minutes to get it in though. Alright, let's move on. Alright, the cylinder has been slid down. Alright, and you can tell that your timing is set correctly from this point because the piston is at the top of the cylinder and your timing mark on your flywheel is at the T mark. We're going to go ahead and move on, and from here we'll be installing our side bolt. So give me a second on that. So now that we have our side bolt installed, we're going to go ahead and set in 2 more case alignment pins, and this time it's going to go there and this time on the opposite side. Next, we're going to go ahead and install our bottom guard. This is our chain guide. Okay. Now that we have the bottom guide installed, we want to go ahead and install our head gasket. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and attempt to do this on camera. Of course, keeping the chain up. Two prods at the bottom of this gasket help to keep the guide in place. Now, this is completely up to the builder. The old cylinder head will fit on the new engine, but to the left there I have a brand new GY6 61mm cylinder head. It was fairly cheap, so I figured why not go with the new materials on the engine. So we'll be installing that now. With the cylinder head installed, I did want to really quickly mention, as far as GY6's cylinder head, it does not have an EGR port, so the actual valve head cover has to be a non-EGR valve head cover. But before that, we're going to go ahead and install our camshaft. Now the camshaft I chose was an A14. In studying the camshafts, there are a lot of different series of numbers out there. 8. I've even actually seen a 15 today. Can't tell you too much about the difference. I know the lobes, the lifters are set a little bit different, but I thought for the price I'd go ahead and give this one a try. It was on Amazon, came with some pretty good reviews, so we'll go ahead and install this one. Don't know if you know this or not, but as far as the install, we're going to have it lined up as far as the timing is concerned, where this center largest hole is going to be facing directly out, and these two smaller holes need to be lined up with the cylinder wall right here. So I'll show you that in a moment. Not sure of how much of a good look we're getting of it, but as you can see, the main hole is going straight to the front of the engine, and then we see our two holes that are lined up with the cylinder wall. So that's about as good as we're going to get as far as setting the timing. And again, I checked on the other side and our mark is at the T. So our timing is set. Alright, let's move on. Alright, so now we're going to install our final case alignment pins. One goes there and the other goes at the bottom right here. Make sure they're in snug. Now we'll install the rocker cradle. Alright, and on here you just want to make sure that the EX that you see right here points down towards the exhaust. So we're going to go ahead and put this on now. Make sure your valves don't hold it from seating. So when you install the rocker cradle, you want to make sure that actually you have no spaces in between the rocker cradle and the cylinder head. And we don't. So now we're going to move on to installing our nuts and washers to hold it in place. Alright, so there we are. You find a couple of different specs on the internet, but I went with the RuckShox specs. So they recommended 7 to 11 foot-pounds of torque. So I like to go a little bit high on mine, make sure they're snug, so I went with 11 foot-pounds, just so you know. Alright, and now we haven't forgotten, we have to put our two side bolts in. So let's do that now. So last but not least, we're going to go ahead and install our cam chain tensioner, and that is right here. to get this plunger to retract, you'll need a screwdriver and turn it clockwise to go ahead and pull that plunger in. And then we're going to go ahead, keeping the plunger in, set her in and line up the holes. And while you're holding that, you want to go ahead and bolt her down. And I'm going to go even on each side until she is perfect. So once she's nice and snug, you can go ahead and release, and that puts tension on the chain. Now the key to this, placing this screw in there, is make sure your screwdriver is big enough where you do not strip it. And now she's tight. Alright, so now that you got everything torqued down to specs, you want to set this valve lash at the top at 0.004 and at the bottom 0.005. So here goes our non-EGR head, well, cover that we'll be installing. And before you install it, you just want to make sure that the actual rubber gasket that goes all the way around it has a good seal. And then we're just going to put that on. Alright, and here we have a final look of the head with no EGR valve you need to worry about. So I was able to take out the EGR system that ran along here, the hoses and the filter. I have done the engine a couple of times. Make sure, I seem to forget every time, to put this ground wire back. You're going to need that for it to start up. And here's our ventilation hose to vent the head. And I want to show you one other item that I'm going to install before I start this engine up that I thought was very valuable. Alright, now that the 171's installed, we want to go ahead and I'm going to add this a little bit later. It's an engine decompression tube made by NCY. There are a lot of them out there. Some of them have catch cans to them, but this is a hose that's going to run where your dipstick is normally sticking out of the engine, and this hose is going to run all the way up to under my seat, and it gives the engine a little bit more room to actually send the oil around. Should take less cranking pressure off of the engine. I'm not going to put the case on right away. When I start it up, I want to check for engine leaks so that I know that she's all set for the road. But that brings another production of Kachi Kids to an end. So I will see you guys a little bit later. We'll do a startup video. Plus, I'm going to run about 300 miles to break the engine in. Feel free to comment, like, or subscribe. And I'll talk to you guys later. Have a great day.